Добрий день.
Good afternoon. My name is Ola Tamanova, and it's my pleasure to see everybody who joins us in Ukraine Media Center Ukraine Forum. Today is day 596 of the full-scale invasion of our homeland by Russian aggressor, and we have invited you to discuss a very interesting presentation, the presentation of the Ukrainian Institute of the Book, and we will be talking about the Ukrainians. What do Ukrainians read during the full-scale invasion? I would like to introduce our speakers. Today is Rostyslav Karandieiev, acting First Deputy Minister of Culture and Information Policy of Ukraine, Oleksandra Koval, Director of the Ukrainian Book Institute, Oksana Brui, President of the Ukrainian Library Association, Oleksandr Afonin, President of the Public Union of Ukrainian Publishers and Booksellers Association. Also joining us online is Radoslava Kabachiy, the International Renaissance Foundation Social Capital Project Manager, and Anastasiya Shurenkova, research expert at the Info Sapiens research agency. So, today there will be a presentation of the study made by Info Sapiens. So, Mr. Oleksandr, please tell us, why is it important? We've seen recently there was a discussion on the social network about whether the Ukrainians read or not, whether their tastes have changed. How do we come to the necessity of this study and how it assists us? Thank you very much. First of all, I would like to thank Ukrinform and Ukraine Media Center Ukrinform for this opportunity to have this presentation made and for the broadcast that everybody may see. I hope they will come in hundreds or probably thousands, because reading is about everybody. Reading, in our opinion, is something that is added to the strategy of development, is the fundamental for the construction of life of Ukrainians, and really there is no single area of life where reading is unnecessary. Well, as you acquire education, as you spend your free time, as you preserve your mental health, as you fulfill your professional duties in any workplace. So basically reading is necessary also for our warriors, for the armed forces of Ukraine, for those who defend Ukraine, for all of us. We want to thank all of them, but still they need to read in between their fights, between their battles, to improve their knowledge about the qualified protection and preserving of their lives and health. So basically us as the Ukrainian Book Institute, we see reading as a necessity, and we try to convince all the others about that and to measure how it happens in Ukraine. We've made this research, this study. So unfortunately, I have to say that last year we didn't have any funds to exercise our activity, and we were doing only the things that we were able to find the partners for. This year we were allocated some funding to implement our program activities, but talking about the monitoring, the study, the funds were not available. I'm afraid they will not be available the next year either, but we found a wonderful partner, International Renaissance Foundation, whose input I appreciate, for allocating this grant for us. That paid for this study by the wonderful research company Info Sapiens, with whom we had collaboration within previous years, and this study is the logical continuation of the previous ones, because all of the indicators are important and then can be evaluated only in dynamics. Before I give the floor to the researchers, I would like to emphasize that my hypothesis regarding the fact that Ukrainians started reading less after the beginning of the full-scale invasion it was unsubstantiated. On contrary, Ukrainians started to read even more, and we have to focus on that, building our further policies on the promotion of reading and promotion of books publishing. So I appreciate everyone's input. I hope the results will be discussed, processed properly, and all of the workers of education area, libraries, we will find out what to do next. Thank you very much, Miss Oleksandra. Miss Anastasiya, we would like to verify this hypothesis because in our opinion Ukrainians read a lot. We see our warriors sitting in the forward edge of the battle area. They keep reading the books, and this is something that makes us different from our enemy. Is it so? Yes, it's really so. I'm about to tell you about the results of the study. There will be a lot of figures. Please don't get frightened. My colleague Ludmila Yusova will tell her part about what we have done. So basically from the beginning, a couple of words about methodology, because everybody likes the figures. On top of that, Miss Alexandra has already announced that we started reading even more, but as soon as people see the figures, they ask, okay, where do the figures come from? So first I'm telling you where the figures come from, and then we discuss what we've measured. So we wanted to study the current situation, and it was fairly mentioned. We wanted to observe it in dynamics, because sociological survey is good, but it makes real sense when we have second wave, third wave, fourth wave, and I hope we will have it, and we will be able to really see how the situation is changing, because basically what we see now is just a picture, is just a static picture, and if we have a dynamic, it looks more like a motion picture. So we were surveying children and adults separately all across Ukraine. We were surveying the kids personally and the adults by telephone. And it's a little bit different from previous years, but now the telephone allows us to survey the people who reside closer to the forward edge of the battle area, and we had more than 1,000 respondents in each segment, and the adults are the people from 16 years and on, and the kids from 6 to 16 years. Our details are comparable with the details that were drawn from the European surveyors. So again, this is the short description of our adult respondents. You see the distribution by gender, and what I would like to emphasize is that with the previous waves in the years 18 and 20, our drawdown was limited to the age of 59 years, so we didn't include people of 60 plus age in our previous surveys, but as we see now, it's 1/3 of our society, and they also economically active, they read. That's an important audience. So in this wave of our research, we included those people, but we remove them from dynamics so that we can correctly compare the details. So let's proceed to the figures. First question that we were asked, we offered a number of activities to the people, how they can spend their free time. It didn't fit in one slide. There were a lot of responses, and again we focused our research on free time. It's not reading for study, it's not reading for school, it's the reading that people choose to do non-forcibly. And between, for example, scrolling Facebook and watching YouTube and reading book, we want to see those people who pick reading book as an option. So first half of this rating, the reading was not included in the first part. So it's sorted by daily use, and we were offering for different activities. You do it on a daily basis, a couple of times per week, or a couple of times per month, several times per year, or never end. As you see, reading of news, scrolling of social networks, messengers. This is what the nation is busy with. So technically it is reading because the people read those news, but it's not reading of the books that we want to study. So now we switch to the second part of our reading. We see that here there are practices aimed at support of the mental and physical health, self-education, creative activities, reading and other activities. And here reading is in the second part of the rating, but closer to the middle. It's good that it's not at the very end of the spectrum. And we see that 16% of respondents read on a daily basis, 18% read a couple of days per week, and a third of the audience doesn't read ever. That's not quite comforting. If we say that the third of Ukrainians never read, but I propose to focus on the positive parts. So significant part of the population reads daily, and if we see the dynamics that I've mentioned, we have, as I mentioned, details for the years 1820 and now year 23. We see that the share of the people who read on a daily basis has grown significantly, twice. So the share of the population that never reads, it remains the same, is 1/3. But those people, as our colleague from European Studies Department expressed themselves, we are curious about those who have ever seen a book, or those who were holding a book in their hands, who know what it is. So they started reading on a daily basis more frequently. And the similar results is something that we see. I'm not giving you the full figures. The report will be more comprehensive and immersive, but this part of the individual practices aimed at the support of physical and mental health, it keeps growing in the daily use. So we're talking about hobbies, sports, such activities where people can support themselves. And reading is a part of this free time practice. Talking about different types of books, we were asking people what books do they read. There are electronic books, audiobooks, and printed books. We included the audiobooks too. It was mentioned specifically that we're talking about the audiobooks too. And if we check out the 23 line, the year 23 line, we see that the printed books prevail in the reader's menu of the Ukrainians. So they are probably the printed books, but again, electronic books and audiobooks, they gain momentum. So electronic reading comes more and more into lives of Ukrainians, and it may be related to a number of factors, because, for example, in the beginning of the full-scale invasions, many publishers opened their electronic libraries for free downloads, and people who were forced to leave their homes, their libraries, they had no other way than read electronic books, or when you relocate, it's easier to grab a smartphone with you than taking 5 books. But if we take this section, this interference, the people who read both in electronic and printed format, or only in electronic format, or only printed format, the picture we're seeing that the adherence of the printed format decreased twice. So again, they don't reject the printed books. Ultimately, you know, the smell of the books, the feeling of touch, it's important, but the convenience of electronic format is increasing. And the share, the share of the people who read in electronic format only is increasing. Even no matter that the printed format is prevailing, the electronic format is gaining more popularity. Then we've studied where do the people get those printed books that they read. Ludmila will tell us in more detail about that. Good afternoon, dear audience. We were studying this important issue, which is important in the modern world, because one thing is asking about some ethereal things whether you buy, and another thing is when we talk about financial issues. And we were asking that question about the number of books bought in year 23, and here we can see that this number is 22% of the respondents. They were saying that they bought from 1 to 4 books, and 12% say that they said from 5 to 12 books. It's quite difficult to ask whether it's too little or too big of a number, because it may vary. So it's interesting to see the details about different types of books, like Anastasiya said, electronic books and audiobooks. And we can see some frightening graphs where on the circle pie diagrams we were seeing that people were not buying audiobooks, just like printed books. 97% did not buy any books. However, this diagram is only for those types of the books, and in reality, as Anastasia was saying, those books are growing in terms of consumption, and the matter of buying is still in the area characteristic for Ukrainian segment. I think it's downloading without buying, it's access to those formats without buying them. It's so-called Ukrainian piracy, which is quite characteristic for the movies, videos, video streams, and is present in this area too. We were not studying this matter additionally, and this is the details that we have now. So talking about the places where people buy printed books, we see that significant percentage, larger percentage of the people, 41%, buy the books at the specialized bookstores in big trade and entertainment centers, basically shopping malls. Also 22% buy at the websites and non-specialized stores, like in the gas stations, in shops that are not specifically bookshops, that have other type of goods, and that number amounted to 17%. The other alternatives, other options were picked smaller number of times, and we observe a tendency to buying of books from the trade spaces of the shops, and it will make us think that this is the tendency for consumption, buying of the book in an urbanized space. We would like here to demonstrate the map by texted.org.ua, where they visualize the fractions of the bookstores in the map of Ukraine. And talking about my previous sentence about buying of the books in the urbanized space, you can see it witnessed by this, or evidenced by this map, because the number of bookstores varies depending on the location and the size of the city. So basically in the big cities there are more bookstores. I will get back to this map a little bit later when we study the next graph, and I will give more comments on that. So talking about the language of reading, it's an incredibly important question, because the matter of language is politicized in Ukrainian society, and obviously we had to study it, what language is more convenient for the respondents to use, because we're talking not about the practices but the attitude. It's a little bit different of a thing, and it's hypothetically study. It's important because the attitude is fundamental for creation of behavioral patterns. And when we study this issue, the people tell us that it's more convenient for them to read in Ukrainian. Look, it's 54% year 23. Very serious growth by this indicator. And respectively, it tells us that there is a tendency for the people, the tendency that evidences that the people will read more and more in Ukrainian. Respectively, there is a decrease of responses about convenience of reading in the Russian language, and this position of indifference when people it makes no difference for the people which language to read in, this number of responses is decreasing too. So getting back to buying of the books, significant number of respondents don't buy books at all, and this is why it was important to study why they don't buy the books and to analyze them in a constructive manner. We implemented analytical categorizing, and we found 4 categories of the reasons why people don't buy the books. And first category, taken 42%, is the absence of necessity. When people say that they don't have a need to buy books, and this absence of need may vary, and these variations are as follows. There is no need to buy books because they have something to read without buying new books, 26%. There is no need because nobody in the family reads any books, it's 12%, and it's just not interesting, and there is no need generally, it's 7% of respondents. The following analytical category was the financial category, or so basically people don't buy books due to lack of funds, and it right by alternatives such as the books are very expensive, there are no money to buy books, or fear to spend money on an uninteresting book. Another category was a digital category. So this trend, the electronic world, including the transformation of text into electronic formats, and this category was taken 22%, and it included the people reading in electronic forms. All the information is available on the internet, and people were listening to audiobooks because they're books too. And finally, the 4th category, the lack of something, when people were saying that something is missing for them to buy the books, and it was related to the lack of time, lack of bookstores, weak health, weak space, there is no place to put books, and also the lack of skills how to pick a proper book. So those were the four main categories, the analytical categories of respondents who didn't buy books according to our study. And as I've demonstrated the map of the bookstores, we were asking the questions about the availability of the bookstores in the settlements, and you may see that the largest number of respondents who said that in our city or village there are no bookstores are the residents of the villages. And the bigger the cities, the bigger is the opportunity to buy the books. So here it demonstrates that there is a lack of bookstores in the rural areas. Thank you for your attention. Thank you for your report on this important study. Mr. Rostyslav, I would like to ask you what you've just seen. Will this study be taken into account in development of the policies of the ministry? And on top of that, we understand that in all of the developed countries, the development of reading is supported by the government. Do we have any such measures planned in the policies? Good afternoon, dear colleagues, dear spectators, and everybody who is curious about our topic. The interest to this topic is already a positive phenomenon, because those who study the matter of reading are the people who generate the messages positive for the state, which should definitely be taken into account. As I was looking through this survey, it was interesting to me to understand what is fundamental in these practices. I mean, supply and demand. So increase of demand for electronic carriers, is it conditioned by the supply of this resource or growth of readers' interest in this resource? It's my personal question, which is of interest to me. I would like to make some conclusion from this study. So unfortunately now we suffer from the decisions taken by the government without any academic reasoning. Probably there is no time for such studies, or maybe it's just the way of things that the Ukrainian government knows everything without any studies. Well, I'm being a little bit sarcastic here, obviously, but the tendency is still such. So this research by Info Sapiens and supported by International Reconnaissance Fund and initiated by our organization in the area of publishing and reading, because based on it we can draw conclusions that may be laid as fundamentals of the future, and probably not future but also current management decisions. So what's important to understand? We need to monitor our practice, what we do right and what we do wrong. The accent is on paying attention to the electronic carriers. It's very obvious. Reading should be understood in a broader manner. We seem to think so, but this presentation only supports our opinion. The reading should be only perceived as the element of reading printed information, no matter whether it's a printed book or an electronic book. Also, we look in a more broad spectrum at the information as such. Even the audio book is a little bit different mechanism of information communication, however, is the same in content. Where the illustrative were the results demonstrated a large share of information sources to us, such as short messages that are used in the social networks. So it creates the habit of the short reading, brief reading, and review of the information that fits in one screen of a smartphone. It probably has some explanation, and the dynamic nature of our life is one of the components that creates relevant demand of the citizens. But we know that some fundamental information, the analysis and conclusions, summaries, it cannot fit in one screen of a smartphone. So educational function of a book is something that develops your analytical thinking and generally some mental capabilities which are important, which are of important function. They are impossible without contact with the thick printed product. So we haven't seen the presentation about the kids, but we have the imagination that the love to the book is created in your young age. If you don't have it formed as you're a kid, you're not going to a library or a bookstore as an adult, and you don't start reading just out of the blue. So there was a lot dedicated in this presentation to the bookstores. We see about a lot of information about the reach to the bookstore by the readers. So it seems like availability of the electronic resources is overall for Ukraine, because internet is available everywhere. The cellular networks are available. However, we see this correlation between the bookstores and the reading, because first of all there are traditions we cannot get away from them. Then the marketing and propaganda of the book, it's done by the scientific institutions, probably not in internet but rather in the open spaces. The bookstores are located in the places of mass concentration of people. Just like, for example, we walk along the street, we see a bookstore, we walk along the mall, shopping mall, and we see a bookstore. So this visual advertising of the book as it is and the point of sale of a book is something that works here, because on the internet this advertising is just very little, or maybe I was not coming across it very frequently. So again, it forces us to think that the support of development of the bookstore networks that sell printed books, regardless of the dynamics or intensification of demand for electronic resources, it's still very important to us. So we have to support the bookstores. This is my summary, in my opinion, and the government should support it. And I hope this idea will be implemented next year. Ukrainian Book Institute identified one of its tasks, and there are budget funds allocated for it to support the bookstore networks through relevant subsidies. What's important too, we haven't seen it on the presentation, but we know among our colleagues and who once may check other pages that with age, from primary school age, the interest to the book wanes and more preference is given to the electronic resources, the satisfaction of the pastime requirements. And obviously there should be an education function, maybe in imposing manner, such an imposing proposition for the children of 14 to 18 years age to opt to get the priority compared to other categories of the population in terms of free access to the books, the accessibility of the books, accessibility to the books as a valuable material product. And with this goal, the Ukrainian Book Institute next year is about to implement, in our opinion, quite an important program of subsidies, or specifically the certificates for the issuing certificates to the young Ukrainians. Now it contemplates newborn and 14-year kids. However, we will double check those age categories just to make them face the fact that reading is inevitable. Here you get the government support, so please pick the book of your choice, read it, and you will probably, or the children will probably read it with high level of probability rather than trying to find some money for this or that book or buy them in some unconscious manner. So I guess we're in the same trend. The results of the study that we see today here and the decisions of the government, well, there is a correlation, and obviously we should increase the attention to the electronic resources. And talking about the audio resources, why there is such a demand for audio books? Because it's convenient. You see, for example, now I'm analyzing myself. For me, the preferred way of receiving information is radio. In my car, it's audio information, because my sight, my other biological sensors are working on other things, and it's natural that audiobook is gaining more and more attention. It's interesting, by the way, now in cooperation with Suspilna Kultura radio, we are resuming the project on radio plays, you know, so, or radio reading, you know, when people are busy with doing something at home or doing something interesting and important for them, at the same time they can perceive the audio information, some interesting books for the time being. It was important for me to see the information that was presented today. We will analyze it today. I will ask the Institute, Ukrainian Book Institute, based on this study, to produce some fundamental proposals on modernization and reformatting of our policies in terms of reading where it's necessary. And I think this practice should be spread in other government policies in the area of culture. So thank you very much. You're doing a great thing. Thank you, Miss Oleksandra. I will have a couple of questions to all of you. Mr. Oleksandr, so the question is such: we see that the number of people who read increased almost twice, and we see a large number of people interested in new formats. Do you relate the growth of the number of readers with the growth of the number of formats? And talking about the publishers, do our publishers catch up with the existing and growing demand, the demand that grows to Ukrainian book? Well, I would like to say that basically all over the world the demand for electronic books is growing, but unlike in Ukraine, they are bought on par with the paper books. And at the same time, the availability of electronic books does not create obstacles in European countries for the growth of number of paper books. In Ukraine, the growth of demand or the growth of desire to read printed books is provoked not so much by the absence of desire to read printed books, but rather by the opportunity to read printed books. No matter what is said, we see the statistics of printing in Ukraine during the war, before the war, and it's not comforting. Even given the error which is provided by the Book Chamber of Ukraine, let it be 15%, but 12% of everything that was published in Ukraine, it's a miserable number for a country as big as Ukraine. And now we're asking whether the publishers catch up with filling those lacuna that were emerging or currently emerging as a result of prohibition of Russian books. So no, they do not catch up, and I'm afraid they will not catch up very soon due to low amounts of the turnover funds, because they are forced, the publishers are forced to work with the turnover funds. And in the leading countries of the world, a lot of things, I mean, in terms of creation of conditions for reading, is made by the government. One of the prime ministers of the French Republic once said that for civilized people, book is such a valuable social, economic, and psychological product on which the development of personality depends on, and the development of the nation depends on, that they cannot be given to the market. And this is the axiom for a country that sets high goals for technological and economic development. We can talk a lot about that, but those figures, 17% of readers who read on a daily basis, I think it did not come out of the blue, and is the consequence of that COVID-1000 that in year 21 was given to the Ukrainians cards that allowed them to buy books. Everybody who is curious about the book world, we've all seen how the Ukrainians were using that COVID-1000 to buy books, and it allowed us to pass without significant costs the Ukrainian publishers' business, so they could stabilize the situation in year 23. So the matter of reading for Ukraine is currently increasingly important. In May this year, during the Warsaw conference, or Warsaw book exhibition, there was a conference, that was called Reading for Democracy. I had an address in this conference, and my speech was called Reading for Life. This is what it means to Ukraine. We have to read a lot, because we don't only have to fight for our country, but we will have to reconstruct it, to rebuild it. And without reading a lot of books, people who only read lines in their messages on the smartphone, they will not be able to work with those materials and to rebuild their country. The question is only whether the government will take it with understanding, that so that they understand that without reading nation they will not be able to rebuild the country. So this step with the certificates is quite positive. God help us to implement it, but there's yet another step, the procurement of books for the libraries. So funding for procurement of the books for the libraries, because there is a threatening number, well, we haven't come to it so far, that comparing to the year 20, there is a decrease of the number of consumers who come to the libraries, and they do not come to the libraries because they don't want to, but because there's nothing to read in those libraries. Thank you, Mr. Oleksandr. We will get back to the topic of the libraries. I want to give the floor to Ms. Radoslava, who is joining us online. Ms. Radoslava, I'm hoping you're seeing us. Oh, good afternoon, dear colleagues. Ms. Radoslava, you've supported this project, you've supported this study, so please tell us why. Why is it important for your organization right now? Well, in fact, it's the most banal question that is being asked from all the donors always. Why are you supporting it? And currently, I don't want to say in the first block why we've supported it, but I would like to say that I am a cultural manager and I'm dealing with books almost all of my life, and to me the words of Mr. Rostyslav were sounded very important. You know, we have to educate the reading, because I was sleeping on the dictionaries of my mother and grandfather as I was a kid, and now I live in a 42 square meters apartment, and my library is 15,000 books. So to me, matter of buying books and reading, it's not a question that has an answer. To me, it's a natural process. I live in the books. What was done now by the Book Institute, what is done now by Miss Oleksandra, and the way the book sector is developing, as a cultural manager and a representative of a donor organization, I can evaluate as a deed, because when all the funding that we have in the state is absolutely limited, there is a team of people which gathers all their forces and finds that funding somewhere else to continue their institutional activity. So for me, the Institute of the Book is about the institutional consistency, is about the people who just trust in what they do. And I am just back from book forum in Lviv, and we know that it's the oldest forum and the first one in Ukraine. It was founded back in the beginning of the 90s, and within 30 years we see that those 30 years were spent for reason. They were not in vain, and we have to understand, and if we don't have government funded, Mr. Rostyslav will explain us better whether we will have it for the next year or not, but us as the foundation that supported the book forum 30 years ago, as a foundation that supported the creation of the newest and the first Ukrainian and pro-Ukrainian editors, as foundations, critics, Ababa Kalamaga, and the rest, we feel it that we have to continue supporting those efforts that unfortunately government cannot cover during the war. Thank you very much. Thank you. Miss Oksana, getting back to the topic of the libraries, it was said already that visiting of the libraries does not correlate with the growth of number of reading people. So do you document the same changes, and if so, what is it related to? I appreciate, first of all, this study that was made by the Ukrainian Book Institute and the agencies. Unfortunately, we don't see the details of the presentation about how the books are read at the libraries, but what we've heard already, that comparing to the year 2018, there is the decrease of number of people reading in the libraries, and Mr. Oleksandr has already mentioned one of the reasons why it does happen. So, because if people want to read, the libraries should have something to read. But another reason is that many people who were attending libraries either are on the front lines or left abroad. So that's a reason too. And in my humble opinion, that small percentage that of the people who still read at the libraries, given all the conditions that we have, is not so bad. I think it does correlate with the official statistics of those who were using the services of the libraries in year 22, and I'm about to say that 1.7 million Ukrainians used the services of the libraries, and if we make an age breakdown, 2.2 million under 15 years, including 244,000 under 7 years, 18-21 year 598,000, and from 22 and on, including people of elegant age, 3.7 billion. And I absolutely agree with those things Mr. Rostyslav was emphasizing, that the love to the book should be educated during the young age is absolutely true. And I want to pay our attention to the fact that the public libraries and school libraries are extremely important in this sense, because it's the first library in the young age. Maybe the parents will educate the love to the book in their children before the school, so we know the existing situation and the understanding of the fact that the libraries are extremely important in increasing the level of reading and in educating the love to reading. This is something that is reflected in the reading strategy that Ms. Lesa mentioned today. And should we implement this strategy in the way that we plan to, probably then we see completely different figures, different percentage, and everything will be growing significantly. Thank you very much, dear colleagues. I would like to invite you to get involved in our conversation. Good afternoon, Svetlana Tkachuk, Ukrinform. I would like to ask about the details of your study. Did you inspect the thematic spectrum of the books? What do Ukrainians read? And maybe you have some recommendations about what Ukrainians are supposed to read on a mandatory basis. Well, let me start about what should be read. There are representatives of the government who develop the policy about what is supposed to be read. Yes, we were asking the people, what was the last book that you've read? And it's more of an entertainment literature. Among the most frequently called authors is Stephen King. So it's the literature that makes you entertained. Well, probably let's restrict ourselves with advice rather than policies. I'm just about to announce that the National Library of Yaroslav the Clever made the study of the libraries. What do the Ukrainians read? And they are about to make the presentation about this quite shortly. And also, is it safe to say that the Ukrainians read more foreign authors rather than the Ukrainian ones? Well, we cannot come to such conclusions so far because our research is not so fundamental. We had a lot of different questions asked from our respondents, but it's another topic for our, so to say, reconnaissance. Why specifically these authors, this general, and what is missing? Maybe Mr. Oleksandr, you can mention something. You work with the publishers. Maybe you have some opinion in this regard. Well, lately, the number of translated books has grown significantly, and it's quite clear because even given the translation of the book expenses, a publisher comes to the market with a name on the book cover that is known, that increases the guarantee of this book being sold. The new Ukrainian authors, they still emerge, but everybody understands that to promote an author, we need significant investments, and book should not only be published, but it should be promoted, advertised, and so on. So what is prevailing on the book market today? Is the translated books of the foreign authors? Well, no, we cannot say so, because the new Ukrainian authors continue emerging. We have quite a powerful cohort of Ukrainian authors who emerged in the beginning of the century 21 and who are known to Ukrainian reader and whose books are bought with pleasure. Thank you very much. Let's summarize it. Miss Oleksandra, I would like to give the floor to you. Yes, right. We've heard a very interesting presentation, results of the study. My dear colleagues have expressed their opinions, and I hope that this study will be discussed for a long time, and we will have more opportunities to communicate our ideas to different audiences to whom this study may be of interest. And now I would like to thank once again the input of everybody who made this presentation possible: International Reconnaissance Foundation, Ukraine Media Center Ukrinform, Ukrainian Library Association, Ukrainian Association of Publishers, Info Sapiens, and obviously the Ministry of Culture and Information Policy. And specifically to you personally, Mr. Rostyslav, I want to thank you for always supporting all of our initiatives. I hope that we will continue fighting Ministry of Finance together, just like the others who think that spending funds on reading is an excessive luxury. And I would like to thank my colleagues from Ukrainian Book Institute who, I'm not afraid to say so, work heroically in these extremely difficult conditions. And I hope that now everybody is convinced that should it be not the Ukrainian Book Institute, the percentage of reading Ukrainians would not increase twice. Thank you. Thank you. I want to thank everybody who works on making the number of Ukrainians grow, on those who help us print, buy, and read Ukrainian books. We want to thank all of you attending our press conference. Let's continue working for our victory. And we want to thank our security and defense forces for this opportunity to hold events like this. So, glory to Ukraine. See you shortly.